Hello YouTube, Vlogger Eric's Rants here, and this week my video is about the double standard in the media and in the US government in general, though I've noticed this has happened recently in the British media as well, regarding Islamist terrorist attacks and far right-wing terrorist attacks. Now, before we begin, I do acknowledge that on sites like Al Jazeera, for instance, sometimes this can go the other way. You can reverse the situations for what I'm going to talk about. I acknowledge that, but it's irrelevant to this video. The killer video might do another one later about the other way around. So, with all of that out of the way, let's begin. And before I start, yes, I use a lot of Wikipedia references. But there was some very specific information that I couldn't find in most of the media sources, so it includes things like specific timing, so I could get an approximate timing thing for where I live. So I had to go to Wikipedia to get these times. They're pretty good as a starting point, but it's not everything. Anyway, let's begin. So, first off, I'm going to talk about the Finsbury Park terrorist attack, where self-radicalised Darren Osborne rammed a van into a crowd of Muslims at the junction of Wadcote Street and Seven Sisters Road at midnight midnight on the 19th of June 2017, killing one and injuring at least 10 others. Officers were called 5 minutes later. Within 8 minutes, according to Theresa May, the police were already treating it as a terrorist attack. However, watching this live on ABC News, I noticed something odd. Despite the police having already said that this was a terrorist attack, I was watching from about 10 AM Central Australia time, so about 1:30 AM London time, until the late afternoon. And it wasn't until after 9 AM London time, 5:30 in the afternoon in Central Australia, that the media had finally started calling it a terrorist attack. That, if you've done the math, is over 8 hours. I can summarize this in one sentence. Police were investigating this as a terrorist attack within 8 minutes of the incident happening, yet the media didn't say it was terrorism until over 8 hours after the terrorist attack had taken place. Let's go on to an Islamist example. More specifically, the London Bridge attack only like 2 weeks before. Now, I know that based on time, it was about 5 or 6 AM where I lived, where it happened. But I can tell you, I checked the news about 8:39 AM, about 2.5 to 3 hours after the start of the attack. The media was already calling it a terrorist attack. I don't know how far back this was the case, but it does help in illustrating the double standard that is present in the media, within Britain as well as in the US. I'll get to those soon. In regards to Islamic terrorism versus far right-wing terrorism. Again, I know this in media circles applies the other way around, but that's not the subject of this video. And just before I move on, I want to point out that the ABC, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, was getting its information largely from its British correspondent, and I think a lot of his information was coming from the BBC. Simply put, when it was the far right-wing terrorist attack, the police investigated it as a terrorist attack within 8 minutes. For the media, it took over 8 hours to call it a terrorist attack. At the other end of the scale, the London Bridge terrorist attack was listed as a terrorist attack by both the police and the media far, far sooner. Quite the double standard, I think, don't you agree? Now, we move on to examples from the United States of America. And let's go with the big one on the far right wing, Dylann Roof. This particular one was a very mixed response. In fact, there's so much relating to the definition of terrorism in this attack that Wikipedia has dedicated a part of its article on the Charleston terrorist attack to the terrorism terminology. Check it out in the description. And in this case, several media outlets, law enforcement, and politicians did call this a terrorist attack. Because it fucking was a terrorist attack. However, a lot of media outlets, law enforcement and politicians were not calling this a terrorist attack. And in the end, police didn't charge Dylann Roof with terrorism offences. And for those of you who say that there wasn't a political motivation behind the terrorist attack, therefore it isn't a terrorist attack, I think I need to remind you that Dylann Roof was a white supremacist and a neo-Confederate. He did this to try and start a race war. The church he chose specifically to commit this terrorist attack was a black church with a long history in the civil rights movement. Dylann also wrote a manifesto where he espoused racial hatred, and he wrote, and I think he said this as well, "I would like to make it crystal clear, I do not regret what I did. I am not sorry. I have not shed a tear for the innocent people I killed." I've got a whole video where I talk about some of the stuff Dylann Roof said. I'll link it at the cards at the end of this video. In summary, multiple media outlets, law enforcement and politicians still to this day deny that what Dylann Roof did was terrorism. Compare this to the Orlando, Florida terrorist attack / hate crime last year. Immediately, the media called it a terrorist attack and a hate crime. Very quickly. In fact, almost immediately. It was crazy, but not surprising. And yes, I will now briefly mention that some in this instance did go looking for other additional reasons why Omar did what he did. There may have been more than one factor. That's usually the case with terrorist attacks, not just exclusive to Islamic. It's the case for all of them. Far right wing, far left wing, Islamic, anarchist, black supremacist, you name it. There's probably multiple kinds. Summary on this one. The media, politicians and law enforcement in this case called it a terrorist attack almost immediately and a hate crime as well. Which it was. I also have an Orlando related video which I'll also link up in the cards. But by contrast, the Dylann Roof attack is still not being called a terrorist attack by some in the media, law enforcement or some of the politicians. So, what is the verdict here? The media is very guilty. This is extremely true of the United States of America, and this seems to happen sometimes with Britain as well, of bias. When it is a far right-wing terrorist attack, sectors of the media either don't say it's a terrorist attack or take hours to do so. While when it is an Islamist terrorist attack in the media, they pretty much always jump on the terrorism thing immediately. Finally, I know you can flip it the other way around. I might make another video on that in the future, and I'll link that up here if I ever do. I've got several links in the description I want you to check out. The media really needs to lift its game and be more consistent on this. And that is my video for this week. I hope you found it interesting. Please rate, comment, share and subscribe, and have a great day everyone.